tetrahedrons completely out of place, creating a symmetry in the middle of symmetry. Now I knew this had to be incomplete, because if this was the fundamental structure of the vacuum, it had to be isotropic and symmetric so that you would have perfect equilibrium. Oh, there's an octahedron. Thank you. Ooh, nice. Q-tips. Thank you. Appreciate. Q-tips with what? Honey?
Rubber cement.
Rubber cement. Here's an octahedron. And so when, yeah, that wouldn't melt as well. Oh, that's good. Because I used to do it with marshmallows, but then people would grab the marshmallows and eat them, and I'd lose my mind. But anyway, so the isotropic vectormetric had to be modified. I didn't know how. One thing I was sure of is that the universe is polarized, so that it had to be two. Okay? Now, if you have a polarized universe, and you have two isotropic vectormetrics, and they're mirroring each other, you have a problem. Because the two mirroring each other, base to base, don't make a sphere. Remember, fundamental axiom, the universe is generating spheres, right? So you don't have a sphere, you have an egg. And so now I had a chicken and an egg problem, and I was like, oh my God, what do I do with this? I didn't know what to do, but I knew it had to be two isotropic vectormetric. I didn't know what to do with these other spaces, these other tetrahedrons in the middle, neither. And you got to realize that at that point in my evolution now, I'm finishing my ski career. I got a bunch of universal 2x4s behind the head, forcing me out, telling me, you got to do this full time, you ain't going to do this while teaching skiing. And this point, I'm still doing all this without a computer. So I'm rendering these geometries in my head, and I'm trying to figure out how they fit together. Okay? I found the octahedrons in the middle and all this, and then I'm going, okay, wait a minute, I gotta make this become a sphere. But I don't want to distort the geometry of the isotropic vectormetric. It has to be tetrahedrons. So I'm like getting all frustrated about it. And I'm, okay, well finally I decided, okay, and I pushed one into the other. And I, generated this in my brain. I was pushing one into the other and trying to figure out where the tetrahedrons would fall. And then that's when I realized what had happened. When you push one isotropic vectormetric into the other so that you generate a perfect sphere, then the central geometry is a vector equilibrium. The only geometry in full equilibrium in all vectorial possibility. And there is no distortion because those four tetrahedrons that were in the isotropic vectormetrics alone were there to accept the reverse one. So that the one isotropic vectormetric was missing its better half. And when the two came together, it created equilibrium. I still get the chills from that time when I discovered this. It was like, oh my God, this is beautifully, metaphorically, and beautiful for what I'm trying to achieve. The geometry of equilibrium, the geometry of the vacuum. And I could see how the male and the females coming together generates a new point of center, a new being. Boy, that, at that point, I was living in my van. I had sold everything, all my ski equipment, all my stuff. I moved into a van so I could sponsor my research. And I moved down south so I wouldn't have to eat so much. And so I was doing this in my van, and I was so excited. I mean, this was better than sex. I mean, I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, And so it was just beautiful. It was metaphorically beautiful, but in the physics of what I was trying to achieve, it was exactly going in the direction I wanted it to go. And I realized that the vector equilibrium had to be fundamental to the structure of space, of the class. Why is the vector equilibrium the only geometry in full equilibrium in all vectorial possibility? Let me show you. If you have a vector going in one direction, and that vector has a certain length, we'll call the length of the vector its force. So longer it is, stronger it is, shorter it is, weaker it is. Okay? In order to get equilibrium, you would have to have a vector in the exact opposite direction with exactly the same length. But that's a weak equilibrium because you'd have to nail that vector so that it would be a perfect alignment here. Otherwise you would miss equilibrium, and any forces pushing down in any other direction would break the equilibrium. It's very precarious. So how would you increase stability? You'd probably add vectors at 90-degree angle from those. Now you increase equilibrium, right? However, the edge of your geometry has longer vectors than the vectors to the center. Because they're longer, they're stronger, and thus your geometry explodes. It doesn't work. What would you do to try to correct it? Probably add vectors at 45-degree angles from these other ones. But if you did that, then the edge vectors are shorter than the vectors to the center. The geometry implodes. You still don't have equilibrium. So what's the solution? The solution is the hexagon. Because the hexagon has edge vectors that are the exact same length as the vectors to the center. It's the only geometry that does that. So now you have equilibrium. And what does that look like in 3D? It looks like a vector equilibrium. This geometry here. Oh. Okay. Vector equilibrium. It's 8 tetrahedrons pointing inwards. Now, this can be seen as well as 4 hexagons intersecting each other. You see that? The red one on the edge, there's a blue one at the equator, and then 2 ones intersecting in the middle. Everybody see that? There's a red one on the edge, an hexagon on the edge. 4 hexagons intersecting, creating equilibrium at the center of singularity. And note that there is 12 vectors radiating from the vector equilibrium. So there's 12 vectors radiating from the center, and there's 12 edge vectors, 24 vectors. These numbers are found in most ancient civilization texts. 12, 24, and so on are found everywhere. The 12 angels with singularity in the middle, the 12 apostles, with Emmanuel in the middle, the singularity, and so on. The 24 elders in Kabbalistic tradition, and so on. So I was really amazed that I had found this, but my geometry was still out of equilibrium. Meaning, on this geometry of the two isotropic vector matrix, the vector equilibrium in the middle had all of its octahedrons filled. That means that when the vector equilibrium is in the middle, the pyramidal structures are completed